Welcome back to episode 233 of the Tall Boy Radio podcast. And as we always say, who knows where it goes when the beer flows? Wow, it's flowing down the road tonight, as it just turns out. And we're going to be a couple of easy riders, me and Dave. How's it going?
Great, thank you, Adam. A little of a hint there of the guest we've got on tonight. He's got a few stories to tell and a bit of a history, no doubt. And the clue was in it. So, Rupert, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, good evening, gents. Good evening, folks. My name's Rupert Newman. So I'm a guy who got into motorbiking at the age of 46, which when you ring the insurance company up, they tell you that the average age of people getting into motorbiking is 46. So I'm a cliche from that point of view, and sort of spent the last 4 or 5 years sort of riding my bike, going on adventures, becoming a blood biker, becoming an advanced biker, and doing all kind of bits and pieces there. So that's the kind of evenings and weekends. But through the course of the day to day, I've got my own business. That business set up just over 12 months ago, running a business called Stronger Humans, which is kind of a business in 3 parts, really. Kind of part exec coaching, so helping folk who get a little bit stuck, and those who get are on their way up, or those people who just want a bit of help. Also doing some leadership development stuff, and then also just working with organizations, just helping them solve problems, whatever they are. Generally not the ones that I walk in and get asked to solve, but that's kind of where we are. So that's a little bit about me.
Thanks, Rupert. I'm just looking at your history on LinkedIn, as we always do. That's slightly more accurate than Wikipedia. And to give us a little history about your background, because you actually have a lot in common with Adam, which I don't know if Adam knows if he's looked, but if he just gives a background on what led you into doing the coaching stuff.
Yeah, so look, I've spent the last 28 years flip-flopping between food retail and healthcare, and so worked for kind of Asda Boots, Sainsbury's Co-op, Army Counties Co-op, and then also worked for a company called McKesson in sort of wholesale. I say wholesale drug dealing, but it was legitimate wholesale drug dealing. Although as one of my friends in a mountain hut once announced to everybody else there when I kind of got back from nipping to the gents room, he's the UK's biggest drug dealer. And at that point in time, I suppose technically that was true, but it was pharmaceuticals rather than anything else. So yeah, no, look, I spent time there and in a variety of different roles. So, running food and healthcare businesses, working in kind of store development, marketing, operations, and a whole range of things really. And sort of did that for 28 years. And then took an opportunity about 18 months ago to go, how do you do a little bit more of what you love, and how do you kind of get paid for it, and how do you do something that maybe the world needs, and then do something that hopefully you're good at. And this is how I ended up sort of being in the situation I am now.
I've got to ask this, Rupert, because Adam was in retail for how long, Adam?
I did 25 plus. I think it was nearly 27 years. I think it was, and a lot of that was with the co-op as well.
Oh, okay.
And Adam was I don't know what rank you got to in the end within the two. I don't know if it's called rank. I don't know, area manager or something like that.
Cluster manager it was. So I had my own store and managed another. Like had a number of other stores sort of reporting into me as well. I think about 10 stores reporting into me.
Yeah, and what you said there, Rupert, about needing a change, I think, Adam, you wanted a change as well, but wasn't your knees probably the main reason for your change?
Yeah, you can tell a good quality retailer by how dusty his knees are. I mean, that's the old secret of the trade. And also, when you get to my age and your whiskers get a little bit grayer, it's how long it takes you to get out of a chair as well, because of the amount of time you spent on your knees. So yeah, I moved on. Near 2022, I left retail. And I now work for a sports betting company. We don't necessarily give away the people who we work for, just in case we fall foul of any social media policies. So yeah, I now work for a large sports better, online based. You probably work it out.
So just a quick one from me then. I know the old chalk knee or dusty knee or whatever you call it. And did you have terrazzo foot that went along with that as well? The kind of
Oh,
yeah, sort
yeah.
of. I only wish they'd had pedometers or sports watches or whatever it was to record what we were doing back in the day there, because I'm not sure 10,000 would have got you to breakfast, would it?
No, and I'm noticing this now. Don't get me wrong. I've always enjoyed a beer or two or 12 maybe, and I've noticed since I've come out of retail. Oh, gee whiz, I am piling on the pounds because, like you say, 10,000 steps that was a morning at best. You know what I mean? If you hadn't done 10,000 by midday, gee whiz, you're in a meeting or something. And now I find myself like if I go home and I've done more than 2,000 steps, I've been to the canteen twice.
Brilliant. I know the feeling.
Just, I'm going to ask both of you because you've both got a retail background. You're both of a similar age. If you just give me one thing that you miss, if there is one thing you miss, what would be the one thing you miss about retail?
Look, it's kind of, I'm going to say the thing that probably most people would say, but there are the finest people working in retail stores. They work all hours of the day. They do kind of, most people are on minimum wage or just above minimum wage, and they are, in the first line of customer service, and quite often, taking a fair bit of stick in, in small convenience stores late at night when people maybe have had too much to drink or aren't feeling so great about their lives. So actually, the people who work in those stores are just phenomenal, and they've all got brilliant tales to tell, wonderful sense of humour. They're great fun, and do you know what? Retail is one of those businesses. It finds you out pretty quickly if it's not for you, and so the people who do stick with it, they've really got a level of, I think, sort of substance and resilience that defines them, right?
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. Totally. What I miss about retail is the people, and not just the people who work for me or with me, the customers as well. You meet some real characters. You meet some real oddballs that say some really peculiar things and make your belly laugh an awful lot. Not at them, sometimes at them, but often with them. But then, like you say, the staff are absolutely fantastic, and I love it. I love it. Like I say, I've been gone nearly 2 years now, and even I think earlier in the week, I got a message off a guy asking me for some advice. Lord knows what I can offer or give him, but I'd offer to go over and see him the next Saturday that I'm in that area, and I will. I'll pop in, and it's stuff like that I relish and enjoy. And don't get me wrong, the industry I'm working in, I meet some fantastic people, some wonderful people in the department that I work in. I love them dearly. But there's something very special about retail folk.
Yeah. There is actually, and David, you know what? In the business I've just set up, I'm enjoying the fact that I'm actually managing to work back with some folk in retail now, and maybe some people who are coming through some of the sort of challenges and opportunities, obstacles, whatever you want to call them, that I did. And so, on the one hand, it's great to be able to support that. On the other hand, it does sort of take you down memory lane because, whilst the world moves on in terms of whether it's technology or what people want or need, there's still same crazy stuff happens in the crazy world of retail, and it's great to hear it's still kind of going strong.
Yeah, that was a pretty nice segue actually, because Adam mentioned that an ex-colleague reached out to him for some advice. You just said exactly the same thing as part of your new business. So let's get into that. So Stronger Humans, I think, is what you call yourself. So tell us a bit about that and what you're setting out to achieve.
Yeah, so look, I was very fortunate to work for some good businesses, some great people at some great times. And, look, I've got a bit rose-tinted spectacles because it wasn't all good fun, but it was largely good fun. And through that, I got to work with and for some pretty great leaders, and they invested in me. And quite often, I got a load of what I would sort of call kind of standard leadership development stuff, and then some coaching work, and then some mentoring folk and things like that. And I always, whenever I went and did what I did, probably the thing people would maybe comment about what I did was always try and build good teams, create a great environment, make it so that people who are coming to work, and it was tough, therefore getting to a place where people enjoyed what they did and walked away at the end of the day feeling like they were thanked and had achieved something, a purpose, if you like. So for me, it was almost trying to take that element of what I really liked and sort of filter out some of the bits that, I maybe enjoyed less, and said, right, how can I maybe help the next generation of folk coming through, or indeed help people who aspire to or have reached, board level, but find it's a pretty tough, lonely job, and therefore, sometimes having somebody outside an organisation to help you gather your thoughts, hold the mirror up, ask you some good questions, and help you kind of work through some of the challenges you might be facing is something that I've really enjoyed doing. And so, whilst I've coached for many years and got internal qualifications, I've kind of been going and getting my postgrad coaching and mentoring qualification. And I just really enjoyed learning again, but I've also enjoyed, just spending time with people, I suppose I think there's a statement in there that, the greatest contribution a leader can make is make other leaders, right? And so I suppose there's an element of that comes into it, if that doesn't sound too contrived or otherwise, but that's kind of what it's about.
No, that's not contrived at all, because ultimately, if you leave leaders behind you, I don't mean behind as in left behind, but if they follow you and they do the same, then through an organization, then you're just going to improve the quality of leadership within the organization, which is going to improve the whole business. So it makes perfect sense.
And do you know what's without going too deeply into it, but what's interesting is that the challenges that people are facing now, albeit different contexts with digital and AI and online shopping and all kinds of different sort of social contexts, they're the same things that I was bumping into sort of 28, 30 years ago. It's how do I prioritize what I do? How do I manage and coach the people around me? How do I develop folk? How do I how do I cope and lead with change? How do I communicate? Well, do you know what? It's all the same stuff. It's just got a slightly different context these days. And so, on the one hand, it's disappointing that it's the same stuff. On the other hand, it's great because it gives me an opportunity to hopefully make a bit of a difference.
Indeed. I want to mention a listener as well, who, by the way, chimed in with a couple of comments there across the bottom. I tell you what, you say I've got some things in common. So Stuart Willis here, who's commented, is a guy who used to work for me many, many moons ago when I worked in Knutsford, and he's commented, so he worked for me in retail, and now he is a key motorbike rider, and he's also a blood biker as well. So you know what I mean. Your paths may very well have crossed.
Well, I'll tell you what, look, so to Stuart and shout out to Stuart, but also, I turn up once a month and do a sort of 12-hour shift on the blood bikers, but it sounds like he said he looks after loads of blood bikers, so he might be involved in the organisation or on the committee of his local blood bikers. And let me tell you, he's doing that voluntarily on top of the riding, so fair play to him. Yeah.
As we've had him on, and we heard about his experiences on here as well. And I know, obviously, like I say, I know Stuart, so it was good to hear from him. But I'll have to speak to him next time and find out exactly how and why his midlife crisis happened.
Oh, he's a controller. There you go. Just for the benefit of the uninitiated. So I'll be on the bike running around. He'll be getting phone calls at all times of day or night, and then allocating that workout and speaking to people who are grumpy because they've been woken up to go out. But fair play.
Doesn't matter if you're grumpy or not, Rupert. If you're out there doing it, it's fine.
No, and actually, look, quick shout out. Actually, everything after 6 o'clock in the evening till 6 o'clock in the morning, evenings, weekends, bank holidays, that moves between hospitals, and whether it's samples, blood, tissue, or otherwise, is done by volunteers, right? So I'm a member of a group in the Midlands. Did about 93,000 miles last year. And it's there's like an army of volunteers that run the country. Actually, if you kind of in every sector, there's folk doing stuff off their own bat in their own time, for no pay, just because they want to help out. And the blood bikers are a great example of that. But there's plenty more.
Yeah. We had these conversations before when Stuart was on the podcast, and we also talked about Adam shaking his head.
No, I'm agreeing.
He's nodding.
No, we did have this conversation, and our minds were blown. But this is something that's done by volunteers. That it's not. It's something as serious as and important as that. We just assumed that you guys got paid for doing it. It really blew our minds, didn't it, Dave?
Yeah, it did. And the reason I was hesitant then is because I've got an absolutely shocking memory, Rupert. And I thought I'd just done the usual of said Stuart was a guest, and Adam's like saying no, he wasn't, because that's the kind of thing I would do. But he was, and my memory hasn't failed me, because one of the things that we were talking about then is, like you, Rupert, I'm a volunteer football coach.
Okay.
And you just said the country is run by volunteers, and that's another thing we got into in that conversation. Now, there's a difference between the two. the objectives of the two things. One is blood. It's about saving lives and making a real difference to people's health. But equally, volunteering football coach. I mean, what age group do you volunteer for?
Well, no, look, I ran. I kind of got involved as a coach. Made that kind of schoolboy error of stepping over the rope when someone didn't turn up one day, and then they just didn't turn up at all. And 10 years later, I'd kind of left there, set up a club, done my level 1 and my level 2, and was looking after a club. And so I don't do it anymore. I very much enjoy watching my youngest son on the touchline, and just smile every now and again to myself when I hear some of the lovely, the lovely chatter that kind of goes on there. But I think for me, back to your point around, the context of blood biking versus volunteering on a football pitch. Let me tell you, I was talking about this with someone the other day, actually, that in my time as a football coach, I probably came across some of the most difficult challenges and had some of the most challenging conversations and experiences than I probably had across my retail career per se, actually, just because, people try and, they want the best for their children, and sometimes they try and live their dreams out vicariously through children on the pitch. But what do you do? What age group are you, David? Which do you get involved with?
3 years ago, I set up an under 10s girls team, and I don't have an under 10s daughter, but I was just looking to help out with coaching at the local club, and they asked if I'd set up a girls team. So my daughter, who was 14 at the time, Alice, she didn't play football, but me and her and a couple of others set up the team. So I managed it for the first season, and then work got a bit busy, so I was assistant manager for the second season, as well as sort of assistant coach for my lads team, who were under 14s at the time, as well as helping out with some Wildcat sessions and Signet sessions and social media and registration forms. You know how it is, Rupert, you get drawn in. So now I'm just a kind of standing coach. But the girls team that I set up, they've just completed their third season. They entered their first all girls league, because when I had them, we were in a boys league. Well, it was a mixed league, but it was 99% boys apart from us. And they just come third in the Premier League and runners up in the Cup, and then also did a tournament and came runners up in that. So over the 3 years, incredibly proud of what they've done. But the challenges that you have through that journey can be interesting. Our parents, on the whole, were pretty good. To be fair, it's generally spectating parents from other teams more than any, and other coaches from certain clubs from certain areas, which tend to have a different outlook on how youth football should be played.
And you're right, actually, that 99% of people are just there for the right reasons, but it only takes, it's like a tinderbox sometimes, isn't it, on there? But actually, I love some of these signs that you see springing up now about, these are kids and they're not professionals and the coaches aren't paid and the refs are volunteer, and so just kind of curb your enthusiasm. But actually, back to your points around girls teams, when we set up the club, we had, I think it was one girls team when we started out, and I saw a photograph the other day of the guys who are running it. I think there's about 10 or so teams, and what's happened with the Lionesses over the last few years and what's going to continue to happen is just brilliant, actually, to see that kind of photo that would have looked very different maybe even 10 years ago. Yeah,
definitely. It's massively accelerating, and it's good. I actually saw, Todd went off topic, but I saw it was on LinkedIn. I saw it, but it was a snip. It could have been from TikTok or somewhere, and it was basically the females talking about the Euros and saying, have you seen that men's Lioness team? They're not very good, are they? Always worrying about their hair and falling over. And it's like, oh, really? Should the men really have a team? Should we have a men's Lioness team? Yeah, we've got to let them have a go, even if they don't win anything. They should really try.
Saw that.
And it's funny stuff.
It's brilliant.
So we sort of segued from your stronger humans to motorbikes via football. So You're a blood rider. We learned that. But you said you didn't start riding motorbikes until you were 46. Is that right?
No, yeah, look, I've always looked at them and thought that'd be cool. And then also looked at them and thought that could be dangerous as well. And so I did this. And look, I kind of, my midlife crisis before my midlife crisis was me and a couple of pals of mine decided that at the age of 38, we're going to start climbing big mountains, which is, I know we were talking, and so we did about 5 years worth of that, and that got that got quite dangerous. And actually, we were cashing a few checks on there that you know at some point in time your luck's going to kind of run out. And so actually, I took to motorbiking as a means of doing something slightly safer from that perspective. But yeah, no, look, at literally at the age of 46, I had a friend at work who used to come back every so often with these tales of where he'd been on his motorbike adventures. He'd been to France or Ireland or Scotland or Spain or wherever it was. And then I had another friend who was a blood biker and stuff, and they just used to talk. And you sit there and go, right, there's something in this. I need to go and maybe go and find a new hobby or learn something new. And so I did, and I went to one of these direct access courses where you do it in a week. Well, that was a mistake because I didn't do it in a week. It took me a lot longer than a week, but it was a painful week. Oh, look, you did the first bit on a schoolyard. You know what I mean? It's called your CBT. It's where you do the basic kind of, going left and right and do it before they take you out on the road. And I must have got there and he must have looked at me and thought, oh, this guy probably ridden bikes before. So whilst he was sorting somebody else out, he said, just go around in a circle there. And I didn't have a clue, no idea what clutch and brake were. And so literally within less than 20 seconds, I've gone over the front handlebars, taken the wing mirror off, put a big scratch down the side of my new helmet, and was sort of left sat in a corner with a bike sort of spinning its wheel next to me, and thought maybe I've invested a fair bit of money in kit and equipment here, and this may be not the right thing for me. But we got there in the end. But it was as we're learning anything new, it's frustrating and it takes time to master it, and you've got to persevere. Unfortunately, with a motorbike, you do end up. It's not one of those things you can learn badly on, if you know what I mean, or if you do, it can hurt.
Yeah.
Was that your motorbike that you were learning on?
No, no. Fortunately enough, that's unfair. No, so when you go to these, fortunately enough, yeah. I mean, it even had one of these big barriers on the front, like almost like, so I couldn't damage stuff, but I did. But yeah, no. When you go, sort of, there's lots of people, actually volunteers running these groups actually, and we went there and they had a series of motorbikes, and what you noticed with these motorbikes, they were looked a bit like Jack Duff with glasses, because there was just sort of stuff stuck on, not because they were old bikes. It was just because people like me get on them, pretend that they know what they're doing, come straight off them, and then they have to try and patch them up somehow. So no, look, I have dropped my own bike, but fortunately enough, that's as bad as it's got so far.
So you did a crash course in a week. Sorry, do you know what you did wrong now? Presumably you used the accelerator and the front brake one after another quite aggressively. Is that kind of what went wrong?
Yeah, look, I've tried to block it out, if I'm perfectly honest. Several rounds of sort of therapy trying to work my way through it. Look, do you know what? I've been used to riding a grifter or a BMX where the front and back brake with the front and back brake, not the clutch and the front brake. So I think a combination of too much throttle took hand off the clutch, still in gear, and kind of off it went. So yeah, no. So yeah, so I did that. I then went and did the week's direct access, which was at Mallory Park, right on the track, which is really good because there's nothing coming in the other direction. But by the same token, it's on a track, so you are expected to kind of make progress and get up to speed and whatever there. So I think it was brilliant, and I learned a lot. But I think it was fairly clear at the end of the week that I wouldn't be going from a test at the end of the week. Because in this country, forgive me if I bore you with it, but there's something called a mod 1 and a mod 2. So you do your theory test, so you go and do the thing. A mod 1 is done inside a cage, a specially measured out cage, because when it came into being, the EU worked in kilometers and the UK worked in miles per hour, and therefore to get to the speed you need to get to pass this test, you can't do it legally on a UK road. And so they had to build there's these cages all over the country where people do their mod 1. And so you have to go around a bend and then do an emergency stop and then maneuver the bike around and do all these kind of things. And so you do that, and then once you've done that, you can then apply for what I would call a bit like your driving test, where someone's not sat next to you. Although on my first test, it felt like he was sat next to me because he was literally riding off my back wheel all the way along. And in fairness to him, I'm glad he was, because it didn't end particularly successfully. So he probably spotted something that I didn't. But yeah, we got there in the end.
I always find it fascinating, fascinating in the sense that people ride motorbikes, because I am one of those people that would just be absolutely terrified. And to me, I'm not a great fan of push bikes. I find, I'm all right on an old sort of railway line or through a park, but put me on a road on a push bike, and I just think I'm going to die, basically. Partly because of myself, mainly because of other people. So put me on a motorbike, which is basically a bike with an engine, and it just terrifies me. I mean, were you scared? Did you have those kind of fears? And if you did, how long did it take to get over them?
Yeah, look, for quite some time, I used to lose weight with the amount of sweat. And one of the things with a motorbike, it's a bit like skiing. You've got to relax and just, because if you sort of hard on all the bits and pieces, it just doesn't flow smoothly. So yeah, do you know what? It took a bit of that, but I tell you what, the best thing I did, I had to do it to become a blood biker, but I ended up doing this. Is I went and did my advanced bike test not long after I'd passed my test. And people kind of go, well, why do you do that? Because you've just passed your test. And so the IAM, the Institute of Advanced Motoring, who I have an interest in now, I'm part of their kind of board, one of their trustees. But at the time, I went and did it. And they take you out on the road and they go, right, everything you learned to pass your test is great, it's fine. But actually, they take you through the syllabus, which is effectively the same as the police riders kind of go through in terms of the different tools and techniques and the different approaches and how to ride. So you almost have to learn to ride a bike, then unlearn what you've just been taught to then learn the kind of advanced way. But I would say to anybody who's getting into it, don't wait and say, oh, I can only do that after 5 years of riding. Go and do it straight away, because you suddenly learn about the road and about vanishing points and positioning and IPSCA and various other kind of things that just make you such a better rider. And that's when actually I stopped the nerves once I'd kind of completed that. I mean, it wasn't complete. I still had nerves taking the test, because any kind of test at the age of 46 is not good. Yeah, so that would be my kind of, if someone was sitting there going, I'd love to do it, but I'm very nervous about the roads, do it and then go and do your advance straight away. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
That's some solid advice. I have to say, I'm like yourself. I look at motorbikes and I do think, that looks cool. You look at Arnold Schwarzenegger in Terminator 2 and he's riding around looking cool, his leather jacket on, shotgun in one hand. I think, yeah, I wouldn't mind a bit of that. And to be fair, Andy, who sometimes presents the podcast with us, I'm not sure what age. I think he probably was around about 36 when he started taking his lessons and what have you. And he's just got himself this year a Harley Davidson.
Good man.
I can't remember if it's the Fat Boy or the Fat Bob. He'll hopefully, if he's watching this, he'll send me a message and correct me. Well, I've sat on it. He wrote it down. And he made sure it was in no way able for me to start it while I was sat on it, because I am one of the clumsiest people you could ever meet in your life. And as cool as it felt, a big heavy bike, I thought, if I was in charge of this, if I'm not killing somebody, I'm definitely going to kill myself on this, because I am hopeless. And it's that recognition in my mind is the one thing that stops me from jumping on a motorbike and having a go. But maybe once that midlife crisis kicks in and you become a little less risk adverse, I might have a pop on it one day. Who knows?
Well, honestly, Jez, I mean, look, I'm biased, right? Because I am. But if on the one hand, you learn a new skill. It's great to sort of get your sort of brain working. Secondly, you just meet a load of new folk, because motorcyclists, when I wasn't a motorcyclist, I used to look at them and think, oh, they look like a pretty rough and tough bunch of folk. But actually, some of the kindest, nicest, most sociable folk, once you kind of go to meets or turn up at a cafe or a bar or whatever it might be. But also, like a bit like people go to the pub on a Friday evening and have a chat with their mates about the week and talk through, what's going well and what's not, and football and everything like this. Well, these days we're all mic'd up in our helmets, right? So we've all got comms with whoever you're out with. So I go out with a couple of guys local to me most Sundays, and you kind of do the ride, and sometimes it's complete silence, sometimes someone's chewing the fat about their week, talking about something that's on their mind or bothering them. Sometimes it's just having a laugh and a joke or making an observation about something you've seen. But I always get back from a motorbike ride and it's almost like someone's taken the weight of the world off my shoulders. I've got outside, bit of fresh air, chat with my mates, maybe hopefully, ridden pretty safely and come back and the world is fine. You can just, it's like going for a run or something like that. It's just good for the soul, right?
Yeah.
So, go on, Adam.
I was just going to ask him though. You say, hopefully you've ridden fine and everything's fine. Have you ever had a ding on your motorbike since you've passed your test?
So I've not had a ding, fortunately enough, twitching all kinds of false wood around me. But what I did do, classic. So I bought a bike that was an 850 bike that I had in the garage, and I kept. I failed my test a couple of times, so it was sat in the garage, and I used to have to look at it the weekends and think one day I'll be riding that. Anyway, what would have been sensible would have been to sort of keep hold of that bike for a few years. Anyway, 12 months in, and I went and got a 1250, a big, a reasonably big adventure bike. And I got it the weekend before I was going on my first tour. We were doing 2,000 miles around Scotland, doing the North Coast 500, which is it's only a 500-mile route. We added onto it, but it's wonderful. And so I got on this bike, and do you know what? I was fine. Got up to Scotland. It was all straight lines there, but you get up to Scotland and it's slightly wetter and slightly curvier. And there's a bit on the North Coast 500 that people will know that's called Applecross, or it's called Balaknabar. It's quite a famous route. I think they do quite a few Top Gear bits on it. It's reasonably tough to get round. It is with motorhomes stopping on the corner to take photographs anyway. But don't get me started on those. I'm only joking. But actually, what I did was I got round Balaknabar. Literally, it was windy. It was raining. There was stuff in the way. You got around this thing, and we got to. 4 of us did it, and we got to the other side, and there was a bit of a sort of lay-by, and we kind of all got off the bikes, put them on their stands. I think there was a bit of man-hugging going on because everyone was quite pleased that they'd got there. I certainly was, because I was, less than a year riding on a bike that was a bit beyond me, and so on and so forth. And so then everyone says, right, we're carrying on, and literally all 4 of us got back on our bikes, and the 3 of them rode off, and I just completely dropped mine down the side into the outside thing. When you sort of stood there going, and this is like nearly a quarter of a ton of bike. And there is a way of getting it off the ground, but I hadn't actually mastered it at that point in time. And then you had all these other motorcycle folk coming past you, basically just looking at you going, can't ride your bike, can you, mate? And they were right, from that point of view. So eventually, 3 or 4 minutes later, 3 people come back round, go like this. And, 2 things. One, they got me back on my bike, and obviously, as you can imagine, they haven't mentioned it ever since. From that point of view, we went on a tour a few weeks ago over to southern France and northern Spain for 9 days, and someone says, "Oh, you remember that time?" Or when we were on gravel, someone says, "Make sure you get your stand down route. Don't drop your bike." And then, like you did in Scotland, it's like, thanks so much for that.
So, I mean, I don't know much or hardly anything. There's probably a fairer thing to say about motorbikes, but 1250, that's quite a powerful bike, isn't it? I mean, 850 is quite a powerful bike, isn't it?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's a 135 horsepower, so it's not a kind of sports bike. It's an adventure bike. It's kind of designed to go off road and be toured on and what have you. It's as a friend of mine, Pete, who often sort of says it's the safer option than the sports bike, because it kind of curbs your enthusiasm. It's a great bike to ride, brilliant, and it's a utility. It's like a Swiss Army knife.
So what is it? Because there might be some people listening that do like motorbikes.
So it's a BMW 1250 GS, and therefore, of the people listening who might ride a motorbike, it probably carries the same amount of support and favour as BMW car drivers. Actually, there's kind of those folk who love them and swear by them, and those folk who don't. But it's just a great bike. It's the one that Ewan McGregor and Charlie Borman went around the world, and they sort of did on the older version of it, and so that's where it kind of made its name. So there is a sort of certain, I suppose, cachet with that. But yeah, no, it's a big old bike. But then at the weekend, so just this weekend just gone, there's a big festival up in a place called Ulster in Warwickshire, called the Adventure Bike Riding Festival, and it's kind of 12, 14,000 people, bands playing, food, all the manufacturers and retailers are there, and you camp for the weekend. A lovely weekend. But they all manufacturers bring sort of 20, 30 bikes each, and you just book on them and take them out either off road or on the roads. And myself and a friend Pete, we've always ridden adventure bikes or like this. We both took Ducatis out for this. Well, that'll be. I mean, it was a wonderful bike, but that'll be the first and last time. I was on a Ducati Monster, and I think it's fair to say I looked like a bear on a tricycle at the circus. You know what I mean? Because I'm quite a big lad, and I did look ridiculous. But when you sort of, it was a very different experience, but good fun, right? All the same, good to understand what I shouldn't do in future. Although there was then talk of, well, you need a stable of bikes, Rupert. You need one for the, and I said, yeah, I can fit one in my garage, and that's about as far as it goes.
No plans to change it then to a Ducati 2000 GXT?
No. Well, look, it probably is a Ducati GXT 2000 the other day, so it's not a bad shot. But no. Look, in the short term, I know my limitations, and I also know when we go touring, we do a bit of green laning, off-roading, and various things, and I wouldn't want to be doing that on slick road tires because I would be able to come back and tell you an even better story about falling off.
Fair play. Funnily enough, last year I was in the States. I went to visit my cousin who lives in Texas, and his friend Ron was, so we hung out with him a little bit, and he was just off the next week. He was getting his Harley transported up to Tennessee, and he was taking it around the mountains with a couple of buddies there. Apparently those roads are quite spectacular. So one of the things, one of the journeys, I believe it's a biker's route, correct me if I am wrong, but Sturgis in the States, is that ever tempted you to visit something like that?
Do you know what? Because I've kind of come to it fairly late, and there's so much to do. I mean, what you realise is the UK is just absolutely chock full of, whether it's in the peaks in Scotland, in Wales, in the Yorkshire Moors, up in Kielder, Northumberland. It's just fantastic. So I haven't nearly done the UK yet, but that's kind of quite nice for a long weekend sort of thing. And then what we've done last 3 years, we've just been in southern France, and the Pico is actually a place in northern Spain. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but if you ever get a chance to go over there, absolutely stunningly beautiful northern Spain. And then we did the Alps the previous year, so did about 8 or 9 countries, and then based ourselves and went out in the loops in the Alps and did the Pyrenees the year before that. So we're kind of working our way through. I think we're going to go down to sort of Portugal, northern Portugal next year, because there's some great roads down there. But there is an embarrassment of riches not far away, either on a boat or just a long ride. The one we'd all like to do is the North to South America. So I think it was the one they did on the long way up. I think it's Ushuaia in Argentina, right the way up to Anchorage. What's it called? Up in Alaska, sort of thing. That's the one that everyone keeps on talking about for retirement. But first of all, we've all got to retire first. Then we've got to have the will and the means to do it. And then thirdly, we've got to make it there. But I think that will happen.
Oh, fair play. That does sound like an incredibly epic journey. I'm curious then. So we got some famous roads around here, haven't we, Dave? Like on the roads to Buxton. I forget the name of the road, but there's a very famous road there. It's very popular with bikers. It's named after a pub, unless I'm mistaken.
I can't recall, but that's the one that I think's got all the don't drive fast signs and you will die signs and speed cameras. Is that the one?
That's the one, yeah. Which is always going to be popular with bikers, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
God bless you.
Cat Fiddle or someone. Stuart's just, I think, put in there thing. So look, are you guys in and around sort of Derbyshire Peak District way? Yeah. So that I've got a friend who's got a place up there, and when we're going up to, we go up to a place in the Lake District just outside called Kirby Lonsdale a lot, and we always take a route through. The peak, sort of boot it up the M1 to Chesterfield and then cut across and do all stuff. It's beautiful. Apart from if you just time it wrong, and then you can be just in the world's biggest traffic jam. From there, but it's a stunning part of the world. And look, I'm in Leicestershire, so it's sort of an hour or so away, so it's good.
So it sounds then that you've only been talking about it for 5 or 6 minutes, but it sounds like you've been on a motorbike for years and years and years, the way you talk about it. So is that kind of like every weekend and every third week you're out and about on it? It sounds like you're on it a lot.
So I tell you what, if you look on motorbike kind of, Auto Trade or otherwise, you often see quite old bikes with very low mileage. And, there's lots of folk who either haven't got the time or money or the inclination, or they've got other things going on in their lives. But lots of people kind of spend more on servicing and MOTing and taxing the bike than they actually do on riding it. And, there's reasons behind that, because they've got other life choices they've got to make, or, they choose to make. I probably do, I don't know, probably between 6,000 and 8,000 miles a year on the bike. So we tour, I commute on it. We go out probably not far from the Cotswolds where I am, so we boot it into the Cotswolds on a Sunday morning. Just pick up a sort of coffee an hour in, and then come back out and put the world to rights. So yeah, no, look, I've probably done in the 4 or 5 years probably more miles than a lot of folk ever get to do, just because I've been fortunate enough to, one, have the time, and then secondly, the other thing for me is I've got a couple of friends who live nearby who ride motorbikes. Similar thing, we get on with each other. We can put up with each other for 2 hours on intercom, and we still like each other after that. And so I think one of the things that people find hard, and I've got a fellow mate who lives down south, is people find hard is having somebody to go out with, just creating a bit of a social thing. But if you go and do your advanced test, there's always a group associated with that. And if you actually take yourself out to some of these biker kind of cafes or bars or whatever, well, someone will come up to you within seconds, and before you know it, you'll have made a friend and you'll be off having a ride in whatever direction you did. So it's quite a sociable thing, even if you haven't got the pals. But I'm very fortunate that I do.
So you have this fantastic social side to it. Then you have all the festivals. Then you can pretty much go anywhere you want anywhere, because you just get a boat or a train to Europe, and then you can pretty much go anywhere. So what's been your favoritist? One day that word will exist. What's been your most favorite in terms of a tour, if you'd call it that, where you've been out for a period of time?
Do you know what? We a couple of years ago we booted it down France and went to the Pyrenees, and it was just phenomenal, because if you ever, lots of people cycle in the Pyrenees, but what's lovely about the Pyrenees is it's just full of twisties. The tarmac is absolutely brand spanking new, and there's nothing on it, and so it's just lovely because you can kind of we're kind of cha in and around the mountains and do what you do. But and I thought that was probably going to be as good as it gets. But this year, as I say, a few weeks ago, we just went to a place called the Picos, a place called Potes in the Pico Mountains in northern Spain, and that just took it to another level. It was almost like, it's so green and lush for Spain, but it's northern Spain. Almost felt like an Amazon rainforest you were riding through. Nothing on the road apart from 2 big horned cows that were stood in the middle of the road as we came around the corner one day, but we managed to avoid those. And so you were just going over scenery, and then ended up in the middle of lakes or otherwise. And it's kind of one of those things, you can show people photographs or footage, but as with most things, it never quite does it justice. But I am working on behalf of the Picos Tourist Board at the moment, because everyone I meet is like, oh, have you spoken to that bloody bloke? He keeps on talking about the Picos. But honestly, it's breathtaking, actually. So we'll try and go back there for a couple of days next year, actually, as well. Honestly, it's stunning, and I'd never heard of it. So I don't know if you guys had, but I'd never heard of it.
No, not. So do you camp then? Presumably, do you? Most of the time, you have a tent with you?
No, absolutely not. So one of the good things about midlife is that my camping days are behind me. We did quite a bit of stuff in mountain huts and camping and stuff with the climbing, but no, we're sort of when we go touring, we're 5 grumpy middle-aged men, and you've got to have decent facilities on tap. And so if you're in the saddle for 6-8 hours a day doing, I don't know, 200-300 miles, and then we tend to either get an Airbnb or get into a sort of twos up in a bed and breakfast, or go to a hotel or what have you. So we tend to sort of, one of the guys is really good at finding really great places at a decent price. So we almost at the end of the day, you kind of that you've got somewhere to just sort of chuck everything down, sort yourself out before you go out for something to eat and have a beer. So no, very much Rough it on the bike. Don't rough it in the evenings because that's just I feel like I've been there, done it, and worn the t-shirt, and actually I couldn't put up with the level of moaning that would come from the group if we did that, and myself included. I mean, it's funny this weekend at this bike festival. The big thing that it always makes me laugh is it has the best toilet and shower facilities you will find at a festival anywhere, probably better than your own front room. And the guy who arranges it has always said, look, if I'm going to get one thing right, it's that. And you know what, I don't know, middle-aged blokes are like about being able to find things to complain about. Well, just we don't give ourselves that particular thing to complain about if we can.
I think this is starting to appeal to me because I would absolutely hate the idea of having to take a tent and do that. But if it's all planned and you know that you're just getting from A to B, you've allowed a nice amount of time and you know where you're kipping, this is starting to sound a bit appealing for me. I don't know what about yourself.
I'll tell you what, David. David, I'm thinking by the end of this, we might have you on a bike. And Adam, I'm sensing, a degree of trepidation from yourself there as well.
You might get me in a sidecar.
I tell you what, you're braver than me if you do.
Yeah, maybe not. Maybe not. I'll get the train. I'll meet you there. Tell me how it is, directions. Dave, is that something you do? Genuinely, I wouldn't trust myself. I would not trust myself on a bike because Dave knows I am literally that clumsy. I am hopeless. Dave, would you ever?
Until talking to Rupert, probably no. Just because I said earlier that I think it just terrifies me. But I've watched what's his name? Long Way Down, Long Way Up. I think he did both, didn't he?
Yeah.
I thought I got it wrong. And I thought that was great. And I know that they had some challenges and they were going through some pretty difficult terrain and whatnot. And that was obviously a TV program, but they were there out doing it. And I thought, sounds a bit, but the idea of going through the Pyrenees, where, as you said, the tarmac's all perfect because that's where they do the tour. So it's all nicely laid. So, nice in the country, in the mountains. And I'm guessing that, when there's not idiots around in cars like the M6, and all you've got to do is just make sure if you're going around a blind corner, there's not a cow, then it's actually probably pretty safe. I mean, if it's chucking it down with rain, I guess it starts to get a bit dicey, but you just slow down, presumably.
Yeah, you look, Adam, I hear your point because I am also pretty clumsy, right? And therefore, it's probably the reason I didn't do it. But it's amazing how being on a motorbike focuses your mind and you become less clumsy, right? But look, if it rains, you change the mode on your bike from dynamic pro to rain mode, and it tightens the suspension up. You've got the right tires on, and you just ride accordingly or get out the rain, right? From that perspective. So yeah, no, you're right. And look, there are always fast drivers, there are always fast riders, there's always cows, there was a wild boar, a couple of stray dogs, there was 20 vultures sat by the side of the road. I don't know where they were waiting for us, but as we were going through the Picos, but there's always something kind of there. But as I said before, if you do the miles, same with anything, right? If you get the miles under your belt, you just become more confident. Look, you for sure, if you look at the statistics, you're 4 times more likely to have a fatal road crash on a motorbike than you are as a pedestrian or a bike rider or otherwise. But those numbers are pretty small. But actually, you can do an awful lot in terms of your visibility, the safety of your ride, and the quality of your riding to just make it as safe as you can. And look, you can walk out on a zebra crossing and someone can drive straight through you, but through no fault of your own. So I kind of take the view that there is a risk, but it's a calculated risk, like there is with most things, because of the things you do to try and sort of mitigate that risk. And look, I'm sure some folk will be like, yeah, but you blast it, and you do. No, that's not why we do it. We do it for the camaraderie, the views, getting outdoors, the social aspect. Yeah, you know what? We all want to improve our lean angles and how we're going around the corners and how we but purely simply, it's actually for the crack and the friendship actually that you get along the way, which is just phenomenal, right? It's just brilliant. Although after 9 days of being in each other's ear for 8 or 9 hours a day, then getting in, then going out for something to eat in the evening, you do need a bit of decompression. You've got to be careful where you go and who you speak to for the first few days afterwards.
Okay, So just a quick question. Obviously, we talked about some of the bikes that you use and you ride, and I've had a quick Google there as you were talking. 'Cause, I'm not great. I know what Harley Davidson looks like, and that's about it. That's about my level of knowledge. But yeah, some fantastic bikes. What about something like a Vespa or a Lambretta? Did that never appeal?
Do you know what? I mean, look, if I look like a bear on a tricycle at the circus on a Ducati, then do you know what I mean? I mean, I don't mind. I really don't mind. When we're away this weekend, the thing I really want to do is get on one of these trials bikes, two 250cc Honda CRF things, and take them off road. So yeah, do you know what? We over the course of the weekend, I think I rode 5 different bikes. One was I think it was called an Indian Chief, and it was like a Harley sort of thing. And a friend of mine who was riding behind me said it looked like I was, giving birth to the bike while I was there, because I was so hunched up, and it wasn't a great look, and my hip I cramped at the same time. But I will ride anything and quite like to experience the different things, but I keep on coming back to what I've got is kind of works for me. But yeah, do you know what? The old mopeds and the kind of Himalayans and the kind of real sort of, look, I wouldn't ride if I was going up to the Himalayas or doing something seriously off road. You wouldn't ride my bikes. It's got too much electronics on it. You'd get yourself on an Royal Enfield, and this kind of thing that you see when you're in certain different parts of the world that, if they break down, there's someone who understands what's going to happen with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, fair play. I was just going to ask a question about. Sorry, he's just mentioned there about the ones with the huge handlebars like that. So when I go to work down D Road and back every day locally. And there's a guy I see when I leave work. When I work till 5:30, finish at 5:30. I see him every single day riding that. And I always think his hands are up perfect. Dude, if you have to turn suddenly, you're goose, because there's no way or certainly not with my mobility. I know, as you just witnessed. You're in a world of trouble. Are they practical then?
Do you know what? I think they're designed for the straight roads in the US, really. So going round roundabouts around, tight corners are probably more challenging. But these guys who ride them, they've ridden for years, and they just make it happen. The biggest challenge for me when you're riding something like this is that all the blood drains from your hands, and so eventually you get pins and needles, and you can't actually feel what's going on. So you're then having to put a cruise control on and sort of going down the road like this, and everyone behind you thinking, is he all right? But you know what, these guys, some of these guys who ride them, they're just, and what was great actually to see at the weekend as well is there's probably the fastest growing market within adventure bikes is female riders. So there's a whole wave of real people on social media. There's a whole market in kit and equipment and bikes, all pointed at female riders, because previously people have just had to make do with gents bikes, gents clothing, gents fit, gents what have you. And so I think watch this space on that, because every year for the last 3 years when I've been to the festival, it's just there's been a growth in that there. So do you know what? It's I know if you said a biker, what would come to mind, but actually I think that will probably change over the course of the coming sort of 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, but I mean, you're right when you say biker. This is probably through TV as much as anything, but you always think someone your sort of age with a beard that's going a bit grey. Basically, that's kind of the first image that comes to your head.
Yeah, look, and I would say to you this weekend, when you went to go on the bikes, you had to queue for a period of time. And so you just get stood in a queue with random people who are doing the same thing as you. And you know what? You stood in a queue and you just get chatting to folk. And they probably looking at me thinking, blimey, what's he like? And then I'm probably looking at them like this. And the nicest, most sociable, they'll talk to you about anything, whether it's bikes or music or places they've toured to or otherwise. And I do think, it is potentially in the main something that's been built up by the media over time, that, biker gangs and whatever. And don't get me wrong, there's that side to life. And I'm not sort of trying to say there's not, but there is in all walks of life, I suppose. But most bikers are just interesting people who choose to get out and explore their adventures, to some degree, or they use it as a cheaper means of commuting or otherwise. So there's a kind of purpose behind it, and so it's always useful. It's always interesting for me to understand when someone started and why, and what brings them there, because there's always a really interesting tale to tell. From that. And look, I'm a Johnny come lately. I've got bikes with ABS and all kinds of, if my bike falls over, it rings somebody to tell them I'm falling off. Whereas you've got the guys I was talking to at the weekend, and it didn't ring anybody. You know what I mean? And they were lying in a ditch for a period of time. So these guys have properly earned their spurs, so to speak.
So you talked briefly about climbing mountains. Because at first I just thought, he just gets the ropes out. Somebody's belaying. He's going up a 50-foot rock in the Peak District. But you mentioned some big mountains. So just tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so look, a mate of mine, Pete, we were the same age, the age of 38, he decided that we should climb Mont Blanc. So we kind of decided to climb Mont Blanc. So, Mont Blanc's more of a trek, but it's hard going, but it's just a blooming hard yomp sort of thing. It's physical endurance. And so we did that. And then over the course of the next 5 or 6 years, went back. So you'd spend 9 months getting ready. You'd go out for a week. You'd do 3 or 4 days of acclimatization and a bit of a test with your guide, and then you'd go for whatever the summit was. So in that period of time, did the Matterhorn, did Monte Rosa, did Mont Blanc, Pollux, Castor, Weissmith, Allenhorn, about 14 of the 4,000 plus meter peaks in the Alps, and just thoroughly enjoyed it, because it is a physical test, it's a mental test for sure. But fell into a crevasse, got lowered off a ledge and did it as good as broke my coccyx, because they got the distances kind of wrong coming down the mountain. And so, eventually you're sort of sitting there going, at some point, this is, by the way, there's somebody out there with 9 lives who thinks they've still got 9, and I've just been squirreling them away, sort of thing. So we just did that. And look, I'd love to do some bigger stuff over in the Himalayas, but it's such a commitment to get ready for that. Because by the way, you never get on the mountain and wish you'd done less training. And it is when you're spending time over 3,500 meters for 3 or 4 nights, you don't sleep, your head's banging, you're probably climbing for between 4 and 8 hours a day. You're sleeping in huts with 40 other folk, all sort of side by side, getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, drinking a cup of this horrible marsh tea, and then making your way up for 10 or 12 hours up a mountain. It's you got to get yourself in the right sort of state of fitness. So these days I choose to see my mountains on the back of a motorbike if I can do.
I mean, what I find really interesting there, Rupert, is like you said, I took up motorbiking, but didn't they do it till I was 46? Oh yeah, I climbed some big mountains, but didn't they do that till I was 38? So, I mean, did any sort of passions or particular adventures you had when you were actually younger, or did you just not bother until you got? I know 38's not old, but
Do you know what? Do you know what's really interesting? So, look, I kind of grew up climbing sort of Snowdon and Ben Nevis and Scarfell, stuff in the lake. So my dad was a geography teacher by his original trade. So I thought it took about 8 hours to get up a mountain. It didn't. It took 2, but he just stopped to show me the various rock formations and the cloud formations and everything along the way. So look, I've always done quite a lot of walking and things like that, and just always played quite a bit of sports, played quite a bit of football and cricket and squash and various other things. But I was part of that kind of generation. And look, I don't knock it, because it helped me doing what I'm doing today, where I was working in retail. And as soon as you go into retail, it becomes any 5 from 7 or any 7 from 7, as Adam will know. And it does play havoc with any kind of hobby or plans that you kind of have. And so that was kind of me from the age of sort of 21 to 30. And then we had a first child and then second child. And I was running a football club for 10 years. And so actually, whilst you were getting time for you, it was more, quick run or quick to the gym or quick cycle or quick whatever, and within there, did a few bits and pieces, cycling to Paris and various other bits and bobs, but it was mainly kind of throwing stuff in when you could find the opportunity. And so I kind of feel like the age of 38 was kind of a little bit of, right, okay, let's see what serious damage we can do now. From that perspective. So and fingers crossed it's fingers crossed it's worked out. But it's, look, in the nicest possible way, we're only here once, and it's about adventure, isn't it? Or it's about living it with an open hand and experiencing as much as you can. If you have the opportunity and the choice to do that, and I've been very fortunate that I've got some great mates who are equally as stupid as me, and they're always up for it.
It's interesting enough, Dave. When you pitched this idea to us, we jokingly call this episode Midlife Crisis. But the kind of stuff you're talking about, that recognition that life is short, you've got to pack as much as you get into the one life that you do get. That is the very essence of a midlife crisis. That's when it hits home to folks in their 30s to 50s, as they say, that they realize, actually, do you know what? I ain't getting any younger. You look at the achievements you've had in life, you look more, you start to focus on the stuff that you haven't done. And so, you know what I mean? We jokingly called it a midlife crisis, but I don't think we were too far away from the button now, were we?
No, well, look, for me, you kind of suddenly, close to death than birth, you start to question your own mortality. Maybe, sadly, one or two people around you maybe aren't around anymore, and stuff start, and you suddenly start, without getting too maudlin, but you suddenly start to go, hang on. And then also, look, I'd witnessed a few things in my own family where people had kind of planned to do stuff when they're retired. And this idea of work for 40 years and then do stuff when you're 65, and 65 came and they didn't get the chance to do stuff, or they didn't get to 65. Or when you get to 65, can you do what you can do when you're 45 or 35 or 55? And so, do you know what? I have had a bit of an aha moment. I'm quite boring to some people who kind of get going, because I do go on about it, but you do kind of, that's what I've talked to my kids about. It just says, look, you never know what's around the corner for you or anybody else around you, and therefore, if you get the opportunity to have a bit of fun, bit of an adventure, go and explore, then fill your boots, because if you wait till, look, I appreciate some people don't have the option, or some people don't have the choice, or don't have the ability because they have other responsibility, caring responsibilities, or work responsibility, or whatever. But you can always get out and have a nice walk in the local woods, or go to local mountains or hills, or whatever it might be. And you know what? It's blooming good for your physical health, but it's also really good for your mental health as well. I don't know about you, but get out and do a bit of that, and the world just suddenly gets you put the world to rights in your own mind, sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely.
We normally wrap things up round about the hour mark. I thought Dave was about to say it there, but I'll jump in and do it for him. Bless him, he left it to me. I always do this bit every week, but normally I do the talky bit that Dave's been doing. So yeah, we normally wrap things up round about the hour mark. So Rupert, have you got any final philosophy that you'd like to leave us with?
Look, I kind of talked a little bit. Look, I was reading something the other day, and it's not my philosophy, and wish it was, but it wasn't. But there's a book called Ikigai that's part of something I've been doing with my coaching, and in it does a bit of a study about why there's all these people in certain Japanese villages who live long, but don't just live long with illness. They live long and prosperous lives. So these people live on average 10 or 15 years beyond most other mere mortals, and they came back to sort of three things within this book that they kind of got from these guys, and there was three things that they said: if you want to have a healthy life, it's not about money, it's about you've got to have a purpose. So you've got to have some reason to get up in the morning, something that keeps you going, keeps you interested, keeps your brain ticking over. You've got to have something or someone you love. So it might be your dog, it might be your partner, it might be your motorbike, it might be the outdoors or whatever, but something to love. And then finally, something to hope for. So something that you want to happen, something that you're working towards. And that's what came out of the study that they did of all these people. And there's parts of Japan that have got these people, and they kind of distilled it all down to those three things. And I know it sounds a little bit like one of those quotes on Instagram or a tattoo or whatever it is, but purpose, something you love, and something to hope for is pretty decent way to if you can tick all three, you're some way down the track, I reckon.
Yeah, fair play, and that's probably the best philosophy we've ever had to leave it on, don't you think, Dave?
Yeah, I think it sums everything up that we've been talking about, Rupert, and really appreciate you coming onto the podcast. And we contacted each other briefly. You talked about what you were going to talk about, and me and Anne have been doing this for a long time, so we kind of have an instinct of when things are going to just be interesting. And what we always say is that when the hour goes in the blink of an eye, you know that we've been enjoying ourselves and talking about stuff that's been interesting. So thank you, Rupert. Really appreciate your time coming on the podcast.
Lovely to meet you, gents, and yeah, good luck with the rest of the series.
Thank you. But no, Dave, right on the money there. It has absolutely whipped by tonight. I feel like we only started 5 minutes ago, and I suspect we may have only just touched the surface. So might look to do an episode with Rupert again in the future if he would indeed be willing to put up with us for another hour. But for us, we'll be talking about something very, very different on the next episode. That's right. We'll be live streaming during the election. So you might find that it's a little less upbeat and a little bit more argumentative. So, folks, I'll wish you a fond farewell.